So in this video, I'm going to show you how to make a Merrill-Bassett diamond anvil cell in Blender. So let's get started. So to start, delete everything in your scene. So select it and press X. Then we're going to make the basic shape of our plates. So press Shift A, add a new mesh and add a cylinder. Change the number of vertices on the cylinder to 6. Go to Edit mode, and then to see through the object, you have to enter X-ray mode by pressing Alt-Z. Go to a side-on view by clicking the X or Y axis. Select the top set of vertices and then press X and delete them. Go to a top-down view by pressing the Z axis. I'm going to zoom in a bit using the mouse wheel. And to add a curve to each of these alternate faces, I want to add a new vertex in between each one. So you can go to Edge Select if you like, but I'm just going to leave it on Vertex Select. Select one edge, right-click and subdivide. And select the next alternate edge, right-click and subdivide again. Finally do the same thing for the last edge. We're then going to grab our first vertex and holding Shift, select the other two. Then press S to scale them out as far as you want the curve to go. Now to make them curve, press Ctrl B to bevel them. And drag that out a bit. Go to the bevel settings and change the effect of vertices and it should turn flat. Then change the number of segments to about 50 so it looks smooth. And you'll see we've got now slightly curved edges. Then go to a side-on view and select the whole thing. Press E to extrude. We can then go back to object mode, leave X mode by pressing Alt-Z, and you can see now we've got the basic shape of our plate. Right-click and duplicate that. So we've got our top plate as well. And then we're going to add some of the holes and pins and things to our plate. So I'm actually going to start with the top plate. So press G and just grab and move the bottom one. And then just press N holding the top plate and change the location to the origin. Then press N again to get rid of that window. The origin of geometry for this is set to be above it. So right click and set origin to geometry. Do the same thing for the bottom plate. So let's add our first hole. So the center hole on the top plate is kind of curved, sort of slanted down inwards. So to get that effect, we're going to add a cone. So press Shift A, add a new mesh and add a cone. Change the number of faces on the cone to be about 80, so it looks a bit smoother. Then press R to rotate. Press X to rotate about the X axis, and then press 180 to rotate about 180 degrees. Press S and Z to scale it down in the Z axis. Go to top-down view, press S to scale it down until it's about the size you want it to be. So I'm going to scale it to about there. Then press G and Z and grab it till it goes all the way through the cell. And if you need to resize it at this point, just press S and Z till it's about the size, the top and bottom holes about the size that you want. So that looks about fine. So select the top plate, and to cut this out of it, we're going to need to add a Boolean modifier to the top plate. So go to the modifier properties, add a new modifier and add a Boolean. Make sure it's set to difference, and under the object I'm going to choose a little dropper and select the cone. Then apply the modifier by clicking the little arrow and apply. And then we can press G to move this and have a look and see if we're happy with that hole. I think that looks fine, so we can delete the cone. But before deleting the cone, actually, we're going to keep it. No, in fact, we won't delete it. We'll keep it and move it out of the way, so then we can use it as a reference for our bottom-sized circle, for our hole on the bottom plate, rather. So let's add a screw hole next. So press Shift A, add a new mesh, and add a cylinder. Change the number of vertices on the cylinder to 80. Go to a top-down view and press S to scale it down until it's probably around that size. Maybe a little bit smaller. So around about there. Place it in front of one of the curves. Then go to a side-on view and move it until it goes all the way through the cell. Probably need to scale it up a bit along the Z-axis by pressing S and Z. You can then select the top plate, add a modifier, add a boolean again, and this time select our cylinder, and then apply the modifier. Selecting the cylinder, you can press G to move it, and move it to the next curve. So add a modifier to our top plate again, a boolean, select the cylinder and apply the modifier. And do that one more time. And once again, we'll keep this cylinder as a reference for our bottom plate. So now let's add the holes where the pins go. So press Shift A, add a new cylinder, and scale it down until it's quite thin. So probably around that size. Press R, X, and 90. Rotate it along the X-axis by 90 degrees. And press S, Z, and Z again to scale it up along the Z-axis relative to the object geometry. So now we're going to, so we're actually putting the viewing holes now, not the pins. I'm going to scale it down a little bit more. Press R to rotate it and put it along the flat edge, so the flat face of the plate. Then press G and Z and move it down so it's near the bottom of the plate. Then add another Boolean modifier and select that cylinder and apply it. Do the same thing for the other two flat faces. Okay, the same as before, we'll keep that cylinder as a reference for our same holes on the smaller, on the bottom plate rather. Okay, so now we'll add our pins, our pin holes. So do the same thing, Shift A, add a new mesh, add a cylinder, do a top down view and scale it down until it's around about that size. Put one, there's one sort of next to each of these screw holes in each corner, so each alternate corner. So go to about there. I'm going to go to a side-on view, press S and Z, scale it up, and then G and Z so it intersects the top plate. And same as before, add a boolean to the top plate, and now select this cylinder. Make sure to apply it. Go to a top-down view, move it to the next alternate corner, do the same thing. The same as before, we'll keep that as a reference for our pins on the lower plate. So that's the upper plate done. So now let's make the lower plate. So press G and move this out of the way. And then press N with the lower plate selected and move it to the origin. Press N again to get rid of that window. So now we can add our screw holes. So let's just place this one on top of it so we can see. So change the X and Y locations to 0 and leave the Z one. It's going to move a bit higher. So let's have our Centaur first. So what I'm going to do is add a new cylinder that looks the same width of this as this cone, same radius. So press Shift A, add a mesh, add a cylinder, move it to the center of the cone and scale it down until it's about the same size. Then move it to the center of the seam. So we can then use that as our larger hole for our lower plate. So go to a side-on view, press G and Z until it doesn't go all the way through the cell. Select the lower plate and add a Boolean modifier. Select our cylinder 5 and then apply it. So now we can go to the cylinder we added, move it up a bit, this time scale it down until it's the size of the smaller hole. Press G and Z until it cuts all the way through the cell. Might want to scale it up a bit as well by pressing S and Z. And once again add a modifier, Boolean modifier to the lower plate, and just cut that cylinder out of it. So now we can delete that cylinder, so select it and press X. So next we can add the, let's get rid of that cone, we can add the screw holes. So go to a top-down view again and just move the position of this screw until it's on top of the original positions. And then press S to scale it down a bit. The mouse is a bit sticky. Okay. And then press G and Z until it intersects the bottom one and S and Z until it goes all the way through. Same as before, add a Boolean modifier to the bottom plate and select cylinder 2 and then apply. So then move that to the other 2 screw hole locations. Do the same thing as before. Now we can keep that for later when we're making our screw so we can get it the right size. And now let's add our pins. So we'll use this original one, place it on the same position as the top pinhole, go to a side-on view, and then we want it to be around the same height as the plate itself. So press S and Z to scale it down a bit until it's about the same height. And then move it on top of the lower plate. We right click and duplicate the object. And then move it until it's in the next pinhole. And then do the same thing again. So duplicate it. We just make sure that's, yeah, that's fine. And move that until it's in the final pinhole location. Just going to move that one down slightly because I moved it up a little bit when I duplicated it. Okay, so then we're going to add our little viewing holes, and that's the bottom plate done. So go to your top view, go to the center of the flat edge and rotate it so it's perpendicular to it. Then we're going to go to a side-on view and press GZ, and this time it rotates near the top of the plate. We want it to go through the plate this time, so press S, Z, and then Z again. Make it a little bit longer. And now, once again, add a modifier and a Boolean and select that cylinder 3 and apply it. So move it again and just do that 3 times for each of the flat faces. And then we can delete that cylinder. Okay, so next we can make the center, so the gasket and the backing seat with the anvils on. So I'm going to move this top plate up a bit. Then we'll add by Shift A, we'll add a circle. And we'll add about 80 vertices to it. Go into edit mode. And scale it down until it's the same width as our, same radius as our cutout. And then press G and Z until it's at the bottom of the cutout. And then press E to extrude and Z to along the Z axis till it's about the same height as our cutout. We can then press F to add a face. And with the bottom face selected, so if you go back to object mode, just grab it and move it up. It might have a face. No, it doesn't have a bottom face, so go back to edit mode. Select the bottom face, Alt Z to enter X-ray mode actually, and then press F on that one. So now we can add our second one of these, so duplicate that and press Z to move it up. We'll add a little gasket, so that's easy. Just add a cube, scale it down in the Z axis, and then scale it down in general till it fits in between. So next we want our diamonds. So I'm just going to delete that. So to do that, go to Edit and Preferences, and then under the add-ons, search for Extra, and under Add Mesh, Extra Objects, just check that box. Once it's checked, when you press Shift A and Mesh, you can choose just a regular diamond. Go into edit mode, into X mode by pressing Alt Z. And with this bottom selection selected, right click and subdivide it. And select the bottom vertex. Press G, Z and move it up until it looks kind of flat. And then move this whole set down till it looks kind of like a diamond, and scale it down a bit. Go back to object mode and leave X mode pressing Alt Z. So now we've got a flat face diamond. So press from the top down view, just scale that down by quite a bit and place it in the center of the cell. Press G, Z and move it up to the, so it's in the middle of the top backing plate. Go to a side on view and scale it up until it's visible from both sides. Duplicate the object. Press R, Y and 180 to to make it upside down, and then press G and Z to move it to the bottom plate. So now we've got our diamonds. The final thing to make is these screws, and then we can add some materials and animate our cell. So to make a screw, firstly add the head of the screw, so add a cylinder. Scale it down till it's the size of the top larger screw holes. I'll press that afterwards. And then press S and Z just to scale it down a bit until it's probably about that size. Then you can right click and shade smooth. Then we're going to cut a hex key hole out of this. So press Shift A, add a new mesh, and add a cylinder again. And change the number of vertices on the cylinder to 6. So place it over the screw head, scale it down. And just place it in the center of that screw. So when it's in the center, press G and Z so it doesn't go all the way through. And then add a boolean to the screw head and use the cylinder as a cutout. Apply that. We can then move that cylinder. We've got our screw head. So you can make a proper screw, and there's a tutorial on YouTube already about how to make screws. It's very simple. But for this one, we don't really need to make a proper screw. We can just make something that looks a bit jagged because it's just simpler, and it makes the tutorial a little bit more simple. So I'm going to add a cylinder again, change it back to 80, and scale it down. So place it underneath our screw head. And this time we're just going to zoom in a bit and pan so that our screw is in the center. And then just scale it down in the Z axis by pressing S and Z until it's really quite thin. Grab it and move it up to the top. Right click and duplicate it. And then just place it slightly off center from the last one. Grab those both, duplicate them, and then move them along the Z axis. So when you've got a few, you can duplicate all of them. Just make it, you want it to be about the same length as the cell. So I'll put it to around about there to start, and then see if that's the right length. Yeah, so that's about the right length. So if we're happy with that, then press Function F3 to bring up the search and join. So now that's all one object. So then you can get rid of this little hexagon. Move the screw into the above the screw hole. Then press GZ and move it above the whole cell. go to a top-down view. And duplicate it and just put it along above each of the holes. Now that we've made the cell, we're ready to add some materials. So go to the rendered view and add some lighting. So press Shift A and add a light. I'm going to add an area light. I'm going to move it up above the cell and just tilt it a bit. Scale it up and change its power to about, I'm going to try 50,000. Maybe a bit too bright. I'm going to go to 25,000. Okay, so then I'm going to select the bottom plate, go to the material properties and add a new material. So you can add sort of quite fancy metals, but I'm just going to add a very basic metallic shader for this tutorial. So turn the metallic to 1. I'm going to make the base color a little bit darker. And then you could choose the roughness. I'm going to change that to about 0.3. And let's change the anisotropic to 1. All right. So then pick the pins and we could just select that material we just made. Do the same with the backing plate and also the gasket. Same for the top plate and same for the screws. Then we want to pick our diamond material. So again, you can make them look quite realistic by adding more fancy materials, but this one I'm just going to add a glass shader. So go to surface and pick a glass BSDF and change the index of refraction to about 2.4. So do the same thing for the other one, so just pick material 2. And then I'm going to change the render ending from EV to cycles. Let me just check on that. Okay, so the roughness of the glass needs to go down to about, well, to 0. Okay, so now you're done. So in the next video, I'll show you how to animate this to make it sort of close and open into this formation. But yeah, I hope this video has been helpful. And see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.